Chapter -5.5 Make Wishes by Frank. By midnight we were done. The wishing chair looked a lot like the one in Minno's church. It was based on an old pulpit carved out of wood with a little gate and a run of spiral stairs leading up to it. Over the top was a canopy where Minno and Sky had strung fairy lights along with tiny fairies and angels. The seat itself was wooden, but it had plush cushions in cream and white. Each one had little diamonds sewn all over it with golden thread. That's how it looked most of the time, but when you sat on the wishing chair, if you wanted, you could wish for the whole thing to look completely different. When it was my turn, I changed the chair into a Viking ship. Solo wished for the chair to raise itself up into the air 20 stories high. That caused a temporary hole to appear in Jax's roof. Of course, Jax was utterly unaffected by any of this. She simply smiled as we all made our wishes. When it was her turn, Jax turned the wishing chair into an enormous throne of ice, and when she made her wishes, they boomed out as if she was using a loudspeaker. "I don't believe in keeping wishes secret," she said. "I do not believe that the power of wishing can be harmed by people knowing what was wished for." "But if you want to keep them secret, you can," said Minno, who is a great fan of secret wishing. "Of course," said Jax. "Each wisher makes a rule to suit herself or himself." "Exactly," said Minno. "The most important thing is to make wishes all the time, because if you do, then they have a chance of coming true. If you never even make a wish, there's no chance at all." "Oh, wishes can come true," said Jax. "Never doubt that." "One of my rules is going to be that midnight wishing is perfect," said Sky, sitting back onto the wishing chair and starting to wish secret wishes. There was an enormous clattering as Ben, Solo and Escher burst into Jax's classroom on their hover skateboards. "We did it!" shouted Ben. "Mine's amphibious," said Escher. "I can skate on land and sea." "I can fly as well," said Ben, as wings sprouted from his board's wheels and clips magically slid over his shoes. "Me too," said Escher, but it was Ben's idea. We all watched as the three skaters zoomed around Jax's huge classroom, up walls, onto desks, up to the ceiling as each board's wings grew and flapped and then receded when the boards came back down to the ground. Around and around they went, and then outside and up into the night air, heading for the stars, and then back inside again. The boards were incredible. I badly wanted one and had a sting of regret for having helped Minno and Sky instead of Ben. "Hey!" shouted Ben. "We didn't forget you lot." Out of thin air emerged 4 boards, each with little wings that sprouted from their wheels. "Hell yes!" I shouted. Sky nearly died with excitement, and Minno was over the moon. "My wish!" she shouted. "I've so badly wanted a skateboard that could fly. I wished for it when I was back at Lowood about 3 years ago." Jax beamed, jumping onto her new board. "Sometimes wishes can take quite a lot of time to come true," she said. "But believe me, they really can come true." "They can!" shouted Minno as she skated straight out the window. Chapter 5 More Noesis by Frank. As we were all skating about, Miguel suddenly turned up, his wheelchair hovering, its wings slowly flapping up and down. Decca was sitting behind him on a sort of pillion seat that Miguel had strapped onto the side of his wheelchair. "Welcome back," said Jax. "Hover skateboards," said Decca. "Excellent idea." "I thought of it," called Ben, clearly feeling grand. "How was your trip?" asked Solo, swooping over to float next to Miguel and Decca. "Fun while it lasted," said Miguel, his voice booming. He seemed in a very good humour for Miguel. "Fun while it lasted?" asked Decca. "It was brilliant." "Brilliant," said Minno, zooming across to Miguel. Exceptionally good, said Miguel, clearly becoming a little grumpy. Although we don't have time to tell you everything. We all nodded, although I could tell that all of us would have liked to hear everything. We saw Blizzard on the way back. He says he'll be back by morning, and we all need to take another trip into the Noesis, said Miguel. I wish it was to collect the ingredients for Noesis ice cream, but apparently it's to further prepare you lot for your time game lessons. It is, said Jax, and Minnow and Frank have been into the Black Pond too. It was very successful. High five, said Decker, holding up his hand to Minnow. I swept over to Decker and slapped his hand as well. What was your main lesson? He asked. To chill, shouted Minnow, clearly having no trouble doing that. Excellent, said Decker. We're going into the Noesis first thing, said Miguel, revving his wheelchair. You're all going to be the best time wizards. The betterest best, shouted Decker. Miguel roared with laughter. The even betterest best than best, he yelled, but then he looked worried. Huddle up, he said. We all gathered around Miguel. Always be on guard, he said. We all nodded. Things can seem good, said Miguel, but then sometimes they're not. You need to watch out for one another. I felt worried. What if things went bad again? Miguel looked at me, his eyes steady. Keep watch, he said. Okay, I said, feeling determined. Miguel grinned. Good, he said. And with that, he and Decker zoomed off in a cloud of sparks. Meet you on the cliffs as soon as we all wake up, said Jax. We all shouted, yes, excited to be going back into the Noesis, but also wishing we had more time to muck around on our skateboards. No stragglers, called Jax to Solo and Escher, who both laughed. As if we'd straggle, shouted Escher. Never, yelled Solo. The following morning it was cold on the cliffs. Blizzard, shouted Ben, running up to say hello. Morning, called Blizzard. As we all huddled near the Time Wizard, he said, a front's come up from the land of ice and fire. Rug up if you can. Girls, don't you have some magic abilities around clothes? Yes, said Sky and Minnow, wishing for scarves and coats. When they appeared, the girls immediately shared them. Okay, we're going back to the time game after this, said Blizzard. But before we go out into the Noesis, I want each of you to be ready to ask the Noesis a question. I could see that we were all wondering what sort of a question we should ask. Blizzard continued. Ask the Noesis for a clue about your purpose in playing the time game. And don't be shy, said Miguel. Really ask. We all nodded, staring at Miguel, who looked rather wild that morning. He'd scooped his hair into a very strange man bun, and his nose was all red with the cold. It made him look like a Father Christmas who'd forgotten his costume. What if the Noesis doesn't answer? Asked Minnow. It'll answer, said Decker. The Noesis is a friend to all future time wizards. A good friend. Don't be afraid, said Jax. It's never good to have fear when you're on the islands of time, and even more so when you're up in the Noesis. It's never a good time to have fear, roared Miguel. Never, shouted Blizzard and Decker, who seemed to be full of a very strange joy. Okay, said Blizzard's hat, suddenly appearing and leaping onto its master's head. Blizzard will lead. Thank you, old mate, said Blizzard, patting his hat. I'll lead indeed, but I need each one of you to focus on being in your own zone. See what you can hear with your ears and every other part of your body, mind and soul. Wait, said Sky. I don't really understand. Jax smiled at Sky and said, Don't worry, it's okay not to understand. Of course it is, said Decker, looking at Sky with the kindest eyes. Each time wizard has a different calling. I'm a musician, so my time wizardry is based around that. And I'm training to be a time wizard, said Jax, but the physics of enchantment is my thing, so I might end up helping with the mechanics of the time game and ways to keep the time garden healthy, rather than directly helping with the lives of all the creatures we guard. Sky nodded. But don't I know what I'll be doing in the future? I mean, I'm Stella, and she's a time pirate, returning lost time to people who've had it stolen from them. That's right, said Blizzard, but before you became Stella, you still went out into the Noesis and searched for clues. Sky nodded. And that's how I became Stella. Partly, said Jax, but a lot of it has been your sheer determination. Decker grinned. It certainly has. Now, ready? Asked Blizzard. Dream up your boards.